So over the weekend, David Njoku asked for a trade. Now, I'm not surprised by this, but there is a discussion that has been sparked by this news, and it kind of revolves around three questions about the entire situation. Why does David Njoku want to get traded in the first place? Where in the world are the Browns going to be able to find a trade for David Njoku? And how are they going to go about getting him off the roster if that's his request? Well, let's talk about that. Now, before we dive into those three main questions about David Njoku in this entire situation, let's talk about David Njoku and what his value is. And David Njoku was a first-round pick in 2017, the 29th overall. He has had 3 seasons. In those 3 seasons, cumulatively, he's had 1,066 yards, 9 touchdowns, and a catch percentage of 58.9%. His best season was in 2018, where he played 80% of the snaps. He had 639 yards, 4 touchdowns, a catch percentage of 63.6, and a PFF grade of 66.3. He's an incredibly athletic tight end. He has great leaping ability, but he also struggles with consistency in his routes and with his hands, as well as just not being a good blocker overall. So for the team trading for David Njoku, it has to be understood from the Browns side that they are trading for what is essentially a developmental prospect. And a developmental prospect who's coming off a season where he barely played, and it wasn't all due to injury for a team that went 6-10. Which actually brings me to the first question about this whole situation, which is, now David Njoku's career has gone down one of the steepest slides I have ever seen in recent memory for a player who was regarded to be a young gem just a year before, and now we're wondering if the Browns could even get anything in value for a trade for him. And this is no joke. Go back to any coverage in 2018, including my own, and David Njoku was mentioned up there with Nick Chubb, Jarvis Landry, Odell Beckham, and Baker Mayfield as some of the bright spots on this Cleveland Browns team. And it seemed like last year throughout camp, that was going to be the case. There was no indication that he wasn't going to have a big role in the offense, and through the first 2 games, that was the case. And then David Njoku got injured in week 2 against the Jets, and somewhere between then and week 14, something happened. Something had to have happened with David Njoku. And I'm not quite sure what it was. Maybe it was an attitude thing. Maybe it was something that went down with David Njoku. Maybe it was another injury concern with him. But something clearly went down between week 2 and week 14 with David Njoku. Because one, it took forever for him to come back, despite him stating, I believe since week 10, that he was ready to come back when he was eligible to come back off IR. And then when he finally was cleared to come back in week 14, he barely did anything. And from the rest of the season on, he didn't even play. So from week 14 to week 17, those 3 games, David Njoku only played in one of them. And in that one game, he only got 3 targets. So something had to have happened with either him and the coaching staff, him and the general manager. Somewhere along the line, something had to happen. And while I'm inclined to believe that Freddie Kitchens was just incompetent and there was a lot of drama going on between John Dorsey and Dee Podesta, I can't sit here and tell you with 100% faith that I believe that's 100% of the reasoning behind why he dipped so much in perceived value to this staff. And again, it's not like the Browns had good tight end play last year. They had Demetrius Harris, who they didn't bring back, and Steven Carlson was a little bit of a bright spot, but he only played in limited snaps, and you really didn't get anything out of Seth DeValve. So it really wasn't like he was being outplayed by anybody at this point. They were desperate for tight end help. He came back, and they didn't want him. That's concerning. And if I'm a team about to trade for David Njoku, that's really concerning, especially since the team that is going to trade him is not really the same team that benched him. So there's a level of clarity that you're going to want over that situation that just isn't going to be available because those guys just aren't there anymore. And then in 2019, to add on top of everything that happened with David Njoku and this team the year before, The team paid big money to Austin Hooper in free agency. And yes, the Browns did pick up his fifth-year option after that, but they also drafted Harrison Bryant, one of the best tight ends in this draft. So you can see, if you're David Njoku, how it doesn't seem like they have a real plan for you or have the same faith in you that the last regime had, and that regime didn't have any faith in you. And then you look at the role he's going to be asked to fill, which is tight end number 2 at best, and he's just not a good fit. Tight end number 2s usually have reliable hands, usually can block at a decent level. None of those things are what I would describe about David Njoku's abilities on the field. So all those things put together, it's really easy to see how David Njoku and his agent kind of see writing on the wall, because as much as the Browns are denying it, saying they want to keep him long term, I mean, just look at the roster and the story's clear. I don't think there's a spot for him. So maybe to him, he's being proactive in this situation and trying to have some kind of agency over where he lands. We'll see how that goes, but I think that's what he's trying to do. All right, so now we're talking about where, and it's not a lot. It's a real soft market for David Njoku, but there is a market there for a cheap, potentially tight end who has a ton of upside and is a better fit to start at tight end 1 for a team, or a team that's going to need a main tight end receiving threat. The first team and the most obvious team is a team like Dallas, who doesn't really have a tight end. This is a team who's desperate to find someone who can fill that number 1 role. Also somebody who could be a red zone threat for Dak Prescott, which David Njoku is a fit to be. Dallas also has a very loaded wide receiving core, which will make getting David Njoku involved kind of difficult, but if they can figure it out, I could see the upside being insane there. The same exact situation is there for the Arizona Cardinals. They don't really use a tight end that much, but they only have Max Williams, and Max Williams is kind of a similar case to David Njoku, so why not take the flyer on David Njoku and see which one of those two guys steps up for your tight end 1 position and would give a nice little blanket for Kyler Murray to throw to. And there's another team, Pittsburgh, I think would make sense, not because they would have plans for him to play right away, but just because they love to develop guys like this, bigger guys who can do it all, but just have to put some things together. Think Dante Moncrief last year, Eric Ebron this year. These are the type of guys that they like to take flyers on and see if they can develop and get into their system. One team I've seen mentioned that I don't think there's a chance in hell they're going to do it is the Baltimore Ravens, because quiet as kept, this makes no sense for Baltimore. Sure, they could develop him, but why would they? They already have Mark Andrews, who's young, who's very athletic, who's better in every way than David Njoku, and has a similar issue to David Njoku, that you don't really want to have more than one player with that, and that's the drops. And drop passes were kind of a problem for Baltimore's offense last year. It didn't get a lot of talk because Baltimore usually won those games, but it still was an issue, and I doubt they would bring anybody in who would continue to still drop the ball, who has dropped balls as a problem, especially when the potential isn't as high as what you already have on the roster. Now, when it comes to this is how I think the whole situation with David Njoku is just going to have to pan out, because I just don't think the Browns are going to be able to find a suitable trade for David Njoku. Maybe if they can find a way to sneak him into an Ngakoue trade, they'll be able to get rid of him. But I doubt they're going to find anybody who's willing to give anything of value up for him, and here's why. The biggest thing that's the issue with David Njoku, on top of his lack of production through his 3 years in the NFL and the fact that he had virtually zero production last year, is the fact that he does have the 5th-year option accepted on his contract. And that fact alone makes him much less attractive, because if he didn't have that option, you would be trading for somebody who will be making around $1 million a year on your cap hit. And if it doesn't work out, you get rid of him and you're good. But now you're in a situation where if you trade for David Njoku, and let's say it works out a little bit, right? Like he has a decent year. Well, now you're in a situation where you have to decide if that decent production is worth $6 million, which is a big jump from $1 million. And unlike the first situation where, hey, if he had a decent year, you'd be able to sign him to maybe a 2-year, $3 million deal to keep him and keep developing him. Now you're in a situation where you have to decide if he's worth $6 million almost immediately. So there's not much time to develop him. And he has to reach a certain bar that's almost unachievable for somebody in his position in order to be worth that $6 million he's going to make next year. So he's almost a guaranteed to be cut the next year anyway if you're going to trade him. So what would be the value in trading for somebody who you can only really keep for 1 year under their current deal that's not necessarily going to help you in now? What's the value in that? Why would you give up an asset now for somebody who's not going to help you in the future, not really help you right now, the way his contract's set up? And that's the biggest issue with David Njoku and why he won't get moved. And if you don't believe me, just look at Eric Ebron, because Eric Ebron is better in every way than David Njoku and very similar to David Njoku. And for the same exact reasons that I mentioned before, the Detroit Lions were not able to find a trade for Eric Ebron. They ended up having to just release him. And again, put yourself in a GM shoes. Why would you risk paying a unproductive tight end $6 million when you can just wait till he clears waivers and then sign him on a 2-year, $3 million deal and then see what happens from there? And then the fact that he and his agent made this public kind of makes the whole situation even harder to trade, because now teams know that the Browns aren't going to keep David Njoku to the end of his contract and pay $6 million for a backup tight end at best on a team that's going to have to give $25 million to Myles Garrett within the next year, and also a bunch of other guys who are going to be due up for money. And while they're doing all that, have $6 million allocated to David Njoku, who doesn't even want to be there in the first place, and also is not your primary tight end. If I were a GM in NFL and I like David Njoku enough to take a flyer on him, I would just wait till he gets released, clears waivers, and then try to outbid whoever it is going to bid him, because it's not going to be a high bid situation. So maybe if somebody offers 2 years, 3, you offer 2 years, 5, boom, you take David Njoku and you get him and you keep all your draft picks. It just doesn't seem like a situation to which anybody's going to trade anything for him. So I don't think the Browns are going to get anything for David Njoku. I don't think David Njoku ends up getting traded. I think he probably ends up maybe getting cut during camp or before camp, because I just don't see a scenario where a team is willing to give up a 5th or a 6th round pick for a guy who's probably going to be available come September anyways. But that's my thoughts on this whole David Njoku situation. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. Do you think David Njoku's going to get traded, and how much do you think David Njoku's worth in a trade market? Let me know down in the comment section below. But thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and ding that notification bell so you can be notified when I upload. But again, guys, thank you for watching. Have a great day. Have a good night.